Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So the CG Tech, the Virtual Lab webinar, a slightly different time today. We'll explain why shortly. Usual intro, we're not going to exceed 30 minutes for the show. We want your questions. Start firing them in as early as you can. And for this episode and future episodes, you'll find us on YouTube, Facebook, and the link will be on our LinkedIn site. Please subscribe, and we're always welcome for feedback, questions, insults, anything you wish to throw at us. So today, let me introduce the panel. Hopefully everyone knows myself, Dave Cummins. Jason, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Jason Van Heerden, and I run a virtual reality arcade. And so imagine we've got a store, or half a dozen stores across Western Canada. That's why we're doing this stream at a different time, because I'm from a different country. So we've got these stores, and you come in with a group of friends. You and normally 3 buddies come in. You get your own chamber, bay, pod, whatever it is, and we give each person their own virtual reality headset, and then we connect them all together in multiplayer games, and they have tons of fun together. And so that business has been doing really well. Obviously, with COVID, we got shut down. Since we've reopened, we've introduced some really interesting things with virtual reality education. And so we've partnered with Stanford and some really cool people in the VR space. So we're really excited about the education piece. And then just as of the last 2 weeks, we're starting to get into VRe-sports.
Brilliant. And we will come back to that. Brayden, please introduce yourself.
Cool. My name's Brayden. I run the marketing for VRKADE. So I work with Jason on a regular basis. So I'm his nerdy design / social media / advertising guy. And yeah, we've got some really cool stuff going on in both education and esports, which we'll let Jason rip on.
Yeah. And you guys outnumber me this week, so you have to go gentle. Usually we try and get 2 of us, one of you guys, and that way if it gets into an argument, I feel like I've got some backup. And again, for those who don't know, we've got our VirtueWorks product being released in the next few weeks, of which we have an EduTech, but we're not here to obviously talk about that. But it's one of the reasons we wanted to have you guys on to have a look at EduTech, particularly in the virtual reality market, and what's happening. And I guess with that, Jason, why don't you tell us what you see happening over the next 50 to 40 years? We're going to go for a big gap.
Ooh, okay. So virtual reality, as you guys know, I mean, there are so many unknowns. We are at the very beginning of what virtual reality has to offer. So it's like at the beginning of your Atari systems, and it's the beginning of the internet. Nobody really knows how to build these interfaces. Nobody really knows how to capitalize on the market, and there's so many different places that virtual reality is going to go. For example, one of the ones that I'm ridiculously excited about is virtual reality websites. So right now we live in a world that's 2D. It's scrolling on our phones. I mean, I'm sure you're watching this right now on a 2D screen, but you give it another 10, 15, 20 years, every single website is going to be a space. You throw on a pair of sunglasses or a lot like the glasses that you have on, David. You push a button, a box in your pocket turns on. Boom, you're now in a virtual reality or augmented reality space, and you visit your website in a 3D space. If I want to communicate with you, I walk over to that wall and I start typing on that wall. Okay, now I'm communicating with. If they show up at my virtual reality arcade website, you're going to show up in one of my locations. So that space I'm really excited about. Not one that we're interested in getting involved with, but one that I'm quite excited about. VRKADE specifically is what I like to call a 3-stranded approach, where we work on virtual reality entertainment, and that's what I explained to you earlier, where we've got our chambers where groups of friends come in, a lot of kids' birthday parties, bachelor parties, groups of friends. The second thing that VRKADE is really excited to work on is virtual reality education, and that's what I just touched on. We've been working on that piece for about 2 years, and I could see virtual reality education, like you asked, over the next 15 or 20 years, absolutely taking off. And if VRKADE had their way, which I mean, chances are VRKADE won't have their way, but I would love for VRKADE to grow in the education space, so that eventually at some point your kids could attend the VRKADE University. And what that would be, it wouldn't be a university that you show up at in Boston or or it wouldn't be a physical place. What you would do is you would sign up for a 4-year psychology degree. We would then ship you a virtual reality headset where you show up in virtual room classrooms, and these classrooms that you show up in, they're not full of students with a lecturer up at the front and he's on the chalkboard drawing out demonstrations. No, he is putting you inside this person's brain, and you're actually able to see the interactions in his brain to look at the psychology of why he makes the decisions that he does. And so we send you this headset. You're in with a whole group of people, and hopefully, I mean, maybe we'll be convinced out of this, but hopefully we wouldn't have all of the fluff pieces, all of the courses that are just, okay, yeah, you've got to take this in order to get your PhD or master's in this particular field. But you only get what you need to be the absolute best in your field. And so again, if VRKADE had their way, the people that came out of this education platform would be the absolute best in the world. They would be the sought out individual for their given field. And normally it would have to be somewhat of a tactile field. For you to learn math in VR is going to be quite difficult. But if it's...
I would disagree with that Kerbal Space Program, but go on.
Oh, fair enough. But if it's anything tactile, it's top shelf.
No, and I agree. You know, I've got 3 kids, and the complaints I get about their education from them mostly is about their interaction with their teacher, but their interaction or their boredom of the lesson. And you're right, even if it's maths, even if I'm sitting doing the same maths class, but I'm at the top of Everest doing it, you know, there's an engagement then that from a kid's perspective, or I'm sitting in Hogwarts doing the same lessons, but
Okay. So they legitimately did a study on this, and they said, okay, for little girls, what is the best teacher? And the best teacher was still a middle-aged woman. That was the one that helped them understand, that caught their attention the most. But for little boys, it was a floating robot. That was the thing that kept them engaged the longest, and they learned the most. And so, yes, you can have a different teacher for each kid according to what he is going to learn from the best.
It's such a simple breed. Why did it have to be?
Yeah, little floating blue robots. I mean, it's the best thing ever. And so, yeah, if VRKADE had its way, we would like to be on the cutting edge of this entire education space and able to provide an education that's just unheard of before virtual reality. When I began, I told you that VRKADE is a 3-pronged approach, or a three-strand. Entertainment, education, and the last one, which I personally think is the biggest, is VRe-sports. And I think VRe-sports is going to become larger than regular sports, which is a huge thing to say. I'm saying it's bigger than the NFL, bigger than the NBA, bigger than the NHL, bigger than FIFA, all of this, which is a huge thing to say. So let me qualify that a little bit. The reason I think that virtual reality esports is about to take off, and again, it's going to take time, 15, 20, 25 years. It may be an entire generation. But the reason sports became a thing in the first place, if you go back, call it 1,200, 1,500 years, sports really became a thing with the Olympics. And really what it said is, my alpha male is better than your alpha male. My guy can run faster, he can jump higher, he can ride his chariot faster, more dangerous. He's just a better alpha male, right? If we fast forward through time, the alpha male has always been the strongest, the fastest, the survival of the fittest, right? And you think of physical prowess when you think of this alpha male. As we move forward, esports has started to become a thing. And why do people watch esports? It's because there is that small part of the alpha male where they're saying, okay, yes, the football player is the biggest and he could beat anybody up, but he doesn't have that intellectual prowess, that fleet of mind, right, as opposed to fleet of foot. And so you end up watching these esports players because you're like, oh, I mean, the brilliance and the level of strategy that they had to play and their reaction time, but it's all mental. So if I actually see the video feed of these players, they're normally skinny little Korean or white kids that are really good at playing their games, but I don't say I want to be that man. They're not an alpha male to your average North American, right? Whereas if you take virtual reality esports, you've got an arena, you've got, you know, the same space as a soccer field that you're dropping 10 people into. You've got 5 people on this side, 5 people on this side. You give them fully haptic feedback guns. They've got their wireless headsets, and you throw them into, say, a destroyed city where they are literally jumping over cars and sliding around corners and to take out their enemy. Now, you take this to a whole new level. And for those of you that have played virtual reality, you've probably tried Superhot. And the way that game works is time moves as fast as you move. So if you stay perfectly still, you've got enemies that are shooting at you, and you can see that bullet coming. But if you don't move, if you stay perfectly still, that bullet doesn't move. As soon as you move, then it moves with you, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll end up sitting there strategizing perfectly still for like 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to grab this gun, duck here, and it's super matrixy, right? Because it's all slow motion or as fast as you want it to be. So taking it back to this arena, if we could set up a game where time moves as fast as your entire team moves, and so you've got your team leader and he says, okay, you snipe this tower, knowing that that bullet isn't going to hit for another 5 minutes, but they know, okay, this is a normal tower that you have somebody sniping from, and you set up all of these things where you've got the strategy, and then the team leader says go, and everything goes into action. Within 20 seconds, one or the other team is dead, and it's extremely fast. But you've got that physical prowess, because these people still need to be able to vert the car. They still need to be able to run. They still need to be able to last for 90 minutes playing a game. But they've got to have that mental fleet of foot where they can quickly change their strategies, where it's full-on military simulators, but we're starting to adjust these variables. My generation is tired with sports because we've adjusted every single variable there is to adjust. Every size of net, from golf to football, soccer, every size or hardness of ball, like we've played with all of the variables. There's nothing left. Whereas we take it into the virtual reality world, and you've got real League of Legends where you are running from this side of the arena to the other. And so I get extremely passionate about VRe-sports, and it is going to be a huge thing. And of course, if VRKADE had our way, we would be a central part of that whole ecosystem. And so we're just at the beginning of this. I've been in VRKADE for 4 years, and I'm finally starting to say, okay, now is the time where we can start to spend money on this and create an arena type free roam experience. I've got a clip for you, David, that if you want to throw it up, it'll kind of give our viewers something interesting to see.
And then I do want to circle back to we had a guy named Mike shoot a really good comment out. If we want to address that now or at the end.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. Let me. I'll play the video and then we can. I think I said to you before, my whole issue with this is I can't survive 30 seconds in a game environment with my kids right now. So I know I'm getting destroyed. It's a 90-minute game. I'm going to last 1.5 minutes.
Not only that, it is so physically exhausting. I did this yesterday, and after a 5-minute round, I'm sitting there heaving, and I was like, no, I can't do another. It's so much, because you are literally diving and ducking and jumping, and yeah, it's very physically active.
So I guess before we go to my question as well, then Brayden, you want to focus on some of the hurdles, some of the issues and the hurdles that we're going to get over to enable what Jason's talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're incredibly excited about virtual reality in both entertainment, esports, and education. And then I thought that the really interesting conversation we could rip on here is, the challenges that we have with customer uptake of the software when it comes to education, and simply because I know that you guys are likely dealing with the same kind of things with your edutech software or your whole platform. So I was just going to rip on that quickly because
please do.
We've got we're massively passionate about getting people into VR education. So one of the things we're doing right now is we're running summer camps where kids can come in and they can do a whole week of like running around in VR. They'll fly through cells, they'll go soaring through the universe. It's incredibly magic school bus. But we've done that because we found that that's the best first step into VR education, because we initially tried making field trips and going straight to school. But some of the biggest challenges we have that prevent that from happening is, one, there's sadly kind of a lack of really curriculum-specific content in place. Because both virtual platforms like yours and VR are so new, there's not a lot of content made for it yet, or content that really solves the problems in education and exactly meets people's curriculum criteria. That's one of the problems we have, is a lack of very specific content. And then just technological difficulties. Using these VR headsets is hard. So getting them to a place that they're simple enough for the software, simple enough for teachers to use them, or students or professors in universities to use them simply is it's just not there yet. So what we've done to get over those kind of lack of software solutions and hardware difficulties is we've just gone and made these big camps where, hey, we've gotten around the fact that our software doesn't necessarily meet what you need. So we don't have to match a curriculum. Now we're just doing science lessons for kids that the parents send them to, and we keep them in our stores. So we've got these really highly trained techs that help the kids out. But that lack of content, because the industry is so new, and tech barrier are some of the two things that we need to overcome, and that's how we're doing it. I'm sure that that's something that you guys have to deal with, at least from a tech point of view. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, we're quite lucky with our platform. We've stayed away from virtual reality in terms of the headset. So we're logging on to a laptop or a tablet or an iPhone. And again, in sort of the Western world, I guess most people have those technologies. So we've deliberately tried to do it that way. But I guess you're right. Virtual reality. Other than, I suppose, anyone now can get a cardboard cutout and do some form of virtual reality, right? Because most kids are on a phone. What about it's topical, neural network. What's that going to do for your environment? The old Elon Musk connecting our brain straight up.
So,
oh man,
that's
I'm in. He had hello. I am connecting up.
Oh yeah, no, that's seriously like. I think it's going to be really exciting. I'm excited for where that goes into augmented reality, but for when it comes to VR, if it gives you a whole nother kind of input method rather than having to use those awkward things and click on stuff. If you're able to sit there and move stuff around with your hands, but also you're going to have telekinesis, essentially. And when it comes to education, I mean, it would be creepy if your teacher could see whether you're paying attention or not by looking at brain waves. But
that's the problem. I worked with someone yesterday. I was talking about this with someone yesterday, and I worked with him. He's a real conspiracy theorist, and he said, the government are only doing this so they can track everything you do. And I was like, well,
that kind of happens anyways.
So yeah, imagine
crazy.
Imagine those VRe-sports, Jason, but or even education. But when you're sitting there and you're playing the game and you got telekinesis, so you're shooting someone at the same time you're like moving a car and pulling some Professor X stuff in game. Like,
so
Oh my goodness, that would be incredibly fun. If you look at history, if you look at most billion-dollar companies, the reason they became worth as much as they did, especially in the tech, well, only in the tech space, is because they invented a user interface that was easy for the average person to work with. Apple, the average person can work Apple devices really well. Amazon with online shopping, the average person can work Amazon really well. If Elon Musk is able to create this technology, somebody needs to step forward and create a user interface that the technology creator, it's going to be the person that works out that user interface. It's going to become the trillionaire.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I hop back to the old podcast with Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, where he talks about cyborgs and he talks about, you know, connecting the brain up, and that's the next step. And you just think we are in an incredible time. Let's jump across to a couple of questions. I know you wanted to get this one, Brayden. So from Mike, with a VR environment and no physical classrooms, does it become harder to engage with students?
So, and I'll let Jason speak to this as well. So from what I've experienced, it can become slightly harder for you to engage with them one-on-one. Just to state that VR avatars are right now. If there's a teacher standing there looking like a blue robot, and the student standing there looking like their little avatar, right now there's not a huge amount of expression that can be communicated apart from your voice, because obviously we can have voice channels piped through. But there's a little bit less of that human empathy connection right now. And you can still make it really interesting with a robot, but what I feel you lose in that, you end up making up for engagement-wise with the fact that, hey, you're teaching about kids about physics and parabolas, and you've got a full rocket ship right there that you can be like, all right, like this is the thrust we're putting in, this is the angles we're doing, like fire. So what you slightly lose in one-on-one engagement, the ability to sit down and talk to students through a lesson, you regain multiple times over by the fact that you can put them right in that environment.
Yeah, I actually really like the question, Mike, because I mean the second part of your question is engaging with students, and if you've tried virtual reality, you know it is fully engaging. So the engagement isn't the problem, but once you take away the physical classroom, now you're losing the outside of classroom experiences. So you're going to have students like if you are at home doing your education the whole time, you're more likely to become lonely, and it's not because the education is not engaging. It's because when you step outside of the classroom, you're not going for your beers with your classmates, right? And so there's absolutely that risk.
What did you have?
Come again?
Aside for beers.
Uni students, not high school students.
Oh, fair enough.
We're not encouraging grade 9s to go drink.
For me, it's the analytics. You know, I think the fact that you can, I mean, as you said, you could convert the teacher to whatever gains the most response. You can work out when people are the most effective. And actually, with our EduTech platform, for us, that's one of the most exciting things. Being able to say, look, this works best 7 in the morning till 12 in the morning, and he works best with this teacher in this environment. So that's what to do, and start optimizing those performance parts, because again, it's a small percentage that makes a big difference over time.
Absolutely, and you get so much tracking data when you're doing stuff in virtual environments. You can see where people are looking on a regular basis. You can see where people are moving, what they're struggling with. So you can really refine your education.
Yeah, and if we're talking about 10, 15 years in the future, you can also tie in artificial intelligence elements to it. So you've got your student that you have to take this concept and come at it from this angle and this angle and this angle. And so you come at it from all of these angles, or you've got the student that catches it the first time and you move on to the next thing. And so what I firmly believe is you're going to have your top 10 teachers in, say, physics, and they will teach the world wide with the help of their artificially intelligent walkthroughs.
And that solves the problem that a lot of schools have, where they have to serve the not lowest common denominator, but the student that's struggling the most in the subject. While they do have to try to slow down to them, those students may just fall off the bus for that subject. And then the advanced students will feel slowed down. So if you can have this kind of software platform where each student is kind of learning individually, and it's automatically adjusting the way it teaches to different students in VR, you can get it to a point where each student's needs are met really well. Yeah. So you kind of lose that imbalance of teaching. And
there's a lot of negative studies on streaming. You know, we call it streaming over here. And there's a lot of negative studies in the class environment, and I get that in the class environment, in a group environment. But if you can pull the children out individually and aim your education at that person's needs, I can't see a negative. And as you say, it's the we're calling it, we're not calling it the water cooler effect. The ability, and you can still do that in VR too, and certainly on our platform, it's one of the key features is that we want to keep that. We want to have between the classroom 15-minute breaks so the kids can walk to the next classroom and talk and chat and engage with each other. Because you're right; those are really, really important, and it's the stuff that I think even as a worker, the last 4 months I've missed. I've missed having a laugh in the office. I've only got Tracy in the office, and she's not very funny. So
Savage.
I think that's a lot of the humor that I get. So let's jump to Carl's comment. I'm getting funny looks. How do you address the cost of headsets? It's just like such an incredible vehicle for education, but I imagine accessibility may be an issue.
Yeah, so over time, these headsets are obviously going down in cost. And if you look at the cost of books for a year, it's going to be just as much as a VR headset. So now we can turn the entire cost of books for 1 year of university to the cost of an entire 4-year degree. I mean, it becomes a no-brainer at that point.
Yeah, it's what you prioritize your cost to, isn't it? People see technology as the expensive addition in cost, as opposed to the cheaper long-term solution to doing it better and more efficiently, more effectively.
100%.
Look at Tracy doing that. Poor Tracy.
Yeah, I think Tracy's been upset. She's off on holiday for a few weeks, so she's got time to cool off. Lornette says, I think VR can mean unparalleled training for first aid, emergency response to the medics. What are the challenges involved in creating something like this?
So one of the biggest challenges is actually creating the software environments. So creating the game, as it were, to train them in. Simply because going and creating those custom assets, as I'm sure you guys know from building a platform in Unity, is requires a lot of time and training and effort. And then one thing that it really does require is kind of like an interface with the medical community, so you're designing it correctly. But I actually don't think that's a massive challenge to overcome. I think that's something that we'll naturally see it evolve to, because I mean, it's really useful. That's a great thing to use it for.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You've just got to make sure for things specific like first aid that there's no negative training. You're doing CPR and it's actually not. You're not gaining a benefit from it. But you're right. It can be chaotic. We've seen a lot in certainly in the firefighting industry over the last couple of weeks and months of really good rigs teaching guys how to engage in fires. I think there's a great one online for a petrol station fire, which is just really, really immersive and quite incredible. So the questions are flooding in here. So do you think virtual reality will ever move to address all 5 human senses?
I think with Neuralink, you'll see that happen a lot faster.
Well, yeah, that's the definition of Neuralink.
Absolutely. When it can give you that neural feedback. There are people who are working, that's a good question. There are people who are working on some really cool like full body suits that like help you feel heat and warmth. And I know firefighters, go back to the last question, are training with those. So they will. I think the hard one is going to be smell.
They do have these capsules that you can put on the bottom side of your headset that's got, I think it's 8 different capsules, and if you mix them differently, it's like mixing colors. You get, the smell of vanilla or the smell of bacon or whatever it is. So it was a Kickstarter that came up about a year and a half ago. So they are addressing it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to say that we're running out of time. This has been a really interesting one for me in particular. And actually, because we've got such close business models as well, it's interesting to see how you guys are attacking it, what you're doing. How can people get in touch with you?
Check us out on Facebook, VRKADE with a K, VRKADE. Send us a message on there. Check us out on our website, VRKADE.com. Send us an email.
Yeah, drop that man a follow on LinkedIn. That man. Both of them follows on LinkedIn, because Jason posts regularly about educational content. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining. Well, I hope to have you on again, and I definitely want to get onto your platform, and I'm hoping we can get you guys onto ours as well. It's been a pleasure, and for everyone else, please tune in next week. We're back to normal time of 12:30, and we'll be posting the link to that out probably later on today.